Hi there. Thank you for joining us today for our chat. I'm here with Andrew Jasper, who is the Director of Health and Personal Ministries in the Victorian Conference. And he's doing something really interesting and actually answering a question that I have, which is it possible to see improvements from depression and anxiety from an online program? So first, I want to welcome you to our chat here today. Andrew, how are you doing today?
Really good. Thanks, Rachel, for having me. It's been a good day.
A good day? Yeah, that's good to hear. So I guess, can you answer this question for us? Is it possible to see improvements in anxiety and depression from an online program? People might be wondering
Yeah,
that.
I was a bit of a purist doing these programs and didn't think it was possible. But in the last 6, 7 months since COVID has hit, we ran a program back in April and saw marked improvements in the participants at that program. And I'm actually doing my second program now, and I'm eager to see those results in about 2 months.
Okay, so you're saying results. What does that actually mean when you say results about anxiety and depression?
So obviously, when people present with depression and anxiety, we'd like to see those symptoms reduce. And what we do is we have an assessment tool that we use in the Nedley Depression and Anxiety program that gives us a post-program assessment and then a pre-program assessment and then a post-program assessment. And we compare those two. And what we find is when people have lower depression, lower anxiety scores, and higher emotional intelligence scores, that's what we're looking for. And it's common for the program to accomplish that in an in-person program, but it was an experiment to see if we could do that within Zoom. And that's what we've done. And our results were really good in the sense that we saw single and double degree reductions in depression and anxiety as far as categories of depression. So you have severe, moderate, mild, and no depression. So for instance, that would mean a severely depressed person could either be moderate or mildly depressed by the end of the program in 8 weeks.
Okay, so you've answered the question that yes, it is possible, but maybe people are wondering, like, what are we talking about in the first place? So there is a program. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about that. Like, what is this program that helps people deal with depression and anxiety?
Yeah. So Nedley's depression and anxiety recovery program started about 20 years ago. In the wake of 9/11, to be honest, his textbook came out the day before 9/11 hit in New York. And he's a internal medicine physician. So in America, those doctors deal with the diseases of the internal organs. And what they were really looking at are the causes of these sicknesses. That's what an internal medicine physician does. A lot of gut work and things like that. But he had 30% of his people coming to his clinic presented with depression. And so he started to get in, what are the causes of depression and what can he do about it, aside from just medication and counseling? So that's where he started a study into this. And out of that study came the Nedley Depression and Anxiety Recovery Program. It's a 20-week program. There's 8 weeks of community interaction involvement, and then another 12 weeks after that to get those new lifestyle habits routinized into the life. It has a lot to do with what he calls the 10 HIT categories. And that's simply a tool that he uses to categorize different causes of depression. So for instance, a cause of depression would be if you're not on a regular exercise program. That would be considered a lifestyle hit. And he found in his clinical practice that if people had 4 or more hits to their brain, then you're really going to find it difficult to have that resilience. And as a result of that, you're going to have either depression and or anxiety symptoms and sicknesses, mental illness. So the basic premise of the program, find out what those HIT categories are, which is what the depression and anxiety assessment test does. And then you go to work on those 8 of the 10 that you can do something about, those HIT categories. So that's the basic nucleus of the program. The format is fairly simple. We get together for a video, we have facilitated group discussion, and then we apply those throughout exercises and assignments throughout the week.
So, Andrew, I know you work at the Victorian Conference, but maybe the average church person is thinking, like, am I qualified to help people get through anxiety and depression? Where's that connection between what Dr. Netley did and what the average church member might feel they're capable of doing?
Yeah, this is a unique question, Rachel, because in the Adventist Church, we've kind of had a hands-off approach to mental health and wellness. We've kind of left that to the counselors and psychologists, which isn't a bad concept, to be honest. This program allows you to be appropriately trained, know your limits and what you are able to do with people. There are certain types of people that we don't allow admitted into the program, but for the most part, people that are depressed and or anxious or experiencing various levels of anxiety, the program is perfectly suited for them. And there is training that you go through in order to become either an associate director, and that's the person that really leads the program, or a facilitator, and that's the person that would help facilitate in a group discussion. Typically, when we're doing training, if you want to do this in your local church, you need to kind of think and first of all pray about who would have a passion for this kind of work. Number one, get that team together, and you need at least one associate director and two facilitators per church. That allows you to do a group. If it's online, that would allow you to do a group of about 4 to 6 people. After that, you'll want to get another 2 facilitators for another group. So those people can be trained and equipped. They go through the same training, whether associate director or facilitator, it's the same training, but there are different licensing levels, and the associate directors are licensed to purchase material and make the program available in their community.
So is this something, Andrew, that you'd say is it both and with counseling, or is it, you go through this program and then you don't need counseling? How does that work?
That's a good question, Rachel, too, because some people who present to our programs might have a more severe situation that they're dealing with, or they might have been in a recent crisis or trauma. And so people in this nature, they may need additional counseling. And I don't have a problem with, the program doesn't have a problem with counseling. In fact, one of the therapies that are mentioned for frontal lobe enhancement is cognitive behavioral therapy. It's a very common form of counseling that's out there with professional psychologists. And that's the method of counseling that we recommend. Within the program, we have more of a self-help type CBT that we instruct the participants how to do on themselves. And that's a process where they identify their cognitive distortions and go through a process of disputing and correcting them and reframing those events that in the past might have caused them distress or depression, and they realize it's actually their beliefs that cause the depression and anxiety. And so they're able to restructure those thoughts into a proactive way. So people can come through the program, some of them even severe. I think of one lady who was suicidal most of her adult life. And she came through the program, and for some reason, this program, I mean, she tried so many things prior, something about the program clicked for her, and she got out of that dark shadow. And it was a real blessing. And we've seen that time and again. But it's not a program that's against medication or counseling. It's just simply something that if you're in medication and counseling and it's not working, this program takes a multifactorial approach to looking at your whole being and give you as much advantage as possible to conquering this.
Okay, I like that. I like that you're talking that it's looking at the whole person, because we are complex beings. But I want to take it back to something you said a little bit earlier, where you mentioned that you were a bit of a purist before. So prior to lockdown, like if someone would have asked you before, do you think that this program can be run in the online space? What would you have said?
No.
Oh, just flat out.
Just flat out no,
you didn't think
because
so.
I'll tell you why. It's not so much the video presentation. You can do that online. And in fact, we have an online portal that they're given permission to utilize to watch the videos during the 8-week program. It's the facilitated discussion. I never in 1,000 years would have thought that you could accomplish that to a level of success. And by success, I mean reducing those symptoms of depression and anxiety on an online platform. We had a church here in Victoria who had done it was actually a dinner with a doctor back in March. And they had a nucleus group of people that wanted to do the program, and the lockdown came. So they called me and said, is there anything we can do? And I said, well, maybe we could run it on Zoom. And we had a group of people, so what were we going to do? So we tried it. And as I mentioned, I think we had 11 or 12 people. And at our graduation, which we were able to have in person, we were able to show the group results. We never identified the individual results, but we had aggregates and averages. And we had great results, declining depression and anxiety symptoms, increase in emotional intelligence, and the hit categories were, hit out of the ballpark, you might say. And that's what we're trying to do through the program.
Now, I just want to let you know if you're watching this broadcast and you just started and you're like, what is a hit category? What are they talking about? What are these measurements that they're talking about? Don't worry, you can go back and start from the beginning. You can watch after we're finished. But actually, if you have any questions, if you're watching right now and you're like, I'm not sure how this might work in my setting, or you have a question about what Andrew's experienced before, just pop a comment in and we'll see if we can squeeze it in during our discussion. Andrew, I know that you're now working on a second. So just to go back, you said that the program is about 20 weeks, and you said that 8 weeks are that group facilitated portion. The online course, was it also 8 weeks, or did it span the 20
Yes.
weeks?
It's 8 weeks. So what we mean by 20 weeks is it's going to take 20 weeks to really get these new habits into the lifestyle. So we're just alerting people that even after the community-based portion is finished, you could really look at another 2.5 to 3 months to really incorporate this into the lifestyle, because we're looking at things like changing some components. I say change, it's more add some components to our diet, some of those fundamental nutrients that help us develop the neurotransmitters in the brain. Getting an exercise program in place for some people can be a really big thing, especially when they're depressed. They don't even feel like getting off their recliner in a day. So these kind of things can take some time. Drinking water, listening to classical music. One of the key assignments, it's a real challenge, is no negative or critical speech for
Wow.
14 consecutive days.
Wow.
We put that one out there at the first session, so they have as much time as possible. But that's a really unique assignment. I won't tell you the background of that, but if you do say something critical or negative, you have to start the 14 days all over again.
Well, that would be
So
challenging for any of us, I think,
anybody,
to,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So those components really help people walk through step by step, and they're gradually increasing their capacity to do more and more of the program as they go through.
Andrew, I'm wondering why, if you can just give us a little bit of background why you're passionate about this topic, because it doesn't seem, I know this is your job, but it seems like something more is coming through when you're talking beyond it being your job. Why are you passionate about this?
A couple of reasons for that, Rachel. One is I've had my own journey through depression and a little bit with anxiety. By the way, anxiety was added to the program only a few years back, so that's a new component. But through depression, I found that as I operate with the program's principles, I'm able to kind of keep that level tone. And also, the winter months can be really challenging. And now that I'm here in a southern hemisphere, in the southern part of that southern hemisphere, winters can be a real challenge. So sticking to the light therapy and the components of the program have become really important to me. Secondly, though, I think of all the programs I've been involved in, and I've been involved in health ministries now, not just in my present position, but even in my pastoral work for about 25 years. I have not seen a program that deals so completely with the whole person. And as a prerequisite to become a trainer for depression recovery, we are asked to spend some time over at Dr. Nedley's residential program at Weimar, California for a 10-day program. We're professional observers. I did that 3 years ago, and Rachel, I came back from that trip with almost this low-grade resentment, thinking, we need this program here in Australia. We didn't have to ship people over there, because some people have what we call treatment-resistant depression or anxiety. And they're in a really tough space. They have used many drugs. They're on many drugs. They're not sleeping. They've been to counselors. Just nothing seems to crack them through that hard shell and out into the sunlight again. So the Depression Recovery Residential Program is a 10-day intensive. And I'll just say that it's intense. But what happened in like day 6 and day 7, you saw these people who were presenting with, these antisocial tendencies. They wouldn't look at you. They wouldn't engage. They were sad. One young lady had panic attacks during the lectures. And Dr. Nedley is a very mild-mannered sort of a speaker. One of the other speakers is Don McIntosh, and he's really charismatic, and she just couldn't handle either one. By day 6 and 7, she was a different girl. And seeing that transformation, that really clinched it for me. I have not seen a program work this effectively in those amounts of time.
And how would okay, so you've talked about the residential program, which is obviously quite intense. So for a church member, someone who's thinking, oh, this might be a good ministry for us to engage in at this time, what does that look like for the average church member to be able to get involved in something like this, especially in the online space, I guess, at this moment?
Yes. So, You mentioned about the April program. The program we're conducting right now is a little bit different. So we have specifically targeted people that want to become a facilitator in the program. Normally, we just run the training and people are free to go run the program. But I decided this time to run a program for potential facilitators, and then we'll do our training in November for them to become trained facilitators. So my message to church members who are thinking, how could I engage? The fundamental level is that facilitator role. You're interacting with the people for about 45 minutes or so to an hour in that facilitated discussion. If you're in person, that can be anywhere from 6 to 12 people. If you're online, I try to keep my groups about 4 to 6 because the online environment is a little bit different with the flow of communication. So you just have to be mindful that you're still wanting to get engagement from each participant. So if people have a sense that they've got a leadership capacity in this role and a passion to do it, then that person should put their hand up for the associate director role, and they could manage the program and the components of the program. And they would fill in if a facilitator, for instance, can't make it that night. They would know how to facilitate that particular discussion. The training is thorough. It's got a whole manual, so each session is laid out on what to cover. The workbook that they're operating from and the other reading materials and textbooks, they have all of that available to them when they get trained. And the only component that's a bit of a challenge for some people is the cost. So in my conference particularly, I try to offset with a rebate that if they use this training in a program within 12 months of their training or within the next year, then I will rebate half of their out-of-pocket expenses just to incentivize to actually do a program. And that's just something we've done here in Victoria. So anything I can do, I do have some colleagues in some other conferences that are also trained in this. Angie Thompson is in the South Australia conference. She's the health director down there. And David Haupt is the ADRA coordinator in North New South Wales. There may be some others that are trained that I may not know of, but those are the three I'm aware of here in Australia that are trained to be able to help others to do this program.
Okay. So if you're interested in running this program or knowing more information, you can send a message to our whatever page you're on, whether you're on the YouTube channel or the Facebook page, or you can drop a comment and we will try to follow up and see how you can get that information. So I guess what we're saying here is that you need to look for the health director at your conference office. That's usually the person who has the information.
That would be true, yeah. And there is an online portal as well, Rachel. That's at nedleyhealth.com. There is a way to take an online training to become an associate director or a facilitator. Down here in the South Pacific, we would actually prefer either a face-to-face training or a Zoom training. So I'm down here in Victoria. My training is scheduled for the last weekend of November. And if we're still in lockdown, my training will be on Zoom. But if it's not, it'll be person to person. We like to get to know the people that are being trained and equipped for this. And otherwise, if you're in a rural area, you can go to nedleyhealth.com and go to the online classes, and you can find a place to purchase the whole class. You'll have access to the videos online. They'll ship the material from America. It is a bit more pricey that way. But if it's in person, then that's a good way to do it here in Australia.
Now, Andrew, when we were chatting, you mentioned something that was a benefit of running the online program that you said may even still be a benefit even after lockdown. And that was that in the program that you ran, you were able to meet with people from different geographic areas within the same city.
That's right. So that first program we did in April, we had people from North Melbourne, southeast suburbs, and also up in the Gippsland area. So because of that, I really do see the capacity for this to be effective post-COVID when our restrictions do lighten up. We happen to have a particular shire in the southeast of Melbourne that is open to us running these programs free of charge in one of their community halls. And so that's what spurred this desire to have a lot more facilitators come to the plate, as it were, so that we can rotate those facilitators. It's kind of a mix because it is a taxing program as a facilitator. You're giving yourself, you're giving your energy, you're concentrating on these people. You're not a counselor, though. You're just facilitating discussion. But the results of it really help to encourage you and really give you that energy and power to see lives changed. So from that perspective, while we might be weary after these programs, it's a blessing. It's such a blessing. So I still see this, the online arena being effective, especially for if you're in a rural area you may not be able to get a team together or enough of a group. I can run this from my home, my office, and facilitate or coordinate the program. And you just need a couple of facilitators in those areas. So it's not a large outlay of investment.
I guess just to clarify, so are you saying that maybe a few churches who don't have a lot of people, they could do a program together? Like if there's a
Yeah,
facilitator here and there, and then they can say we can form a group together?
that's right. Now, how that operates for them to run the Zoom, I'm not sure, but I can actually run the Zoom that way. One of my issues I had to develop for this next training is, do I train people to run this in Zoom or just in the person to person? So I would actually like to do a hybrid. And this has been an experiment this year. We were all just thrust into this and had to pivot. And so our program is a little bit different than the person to person. We actually have participants watch the videos on the Nedley video portal prior to the session. And then we have a swift introduction, brief introduction. We go right into the facilitated groups, which in Zoom is the breakout rooms, usually 4 participants with 2 facilitators. And then we come back at the end of that hour and we close it off for that night. Also, we encourage our facilitators to be in touch by phone with each participant. Since we're not meeting in person, it's the best way we can kind of mitigate against that lack of personal connect. So that's what we do, is we call them up and we chat.
And then what happens after the program is over? So after, I know you said it's 20 weeks for those, to add those new behaviors, but does anything happen after those 8 weeks of actually meeting together in person?
Good question. So we do have a follow-up program that's a little unique, but it's really creative, and that is a Daniel series that looks at the first 6 chapters of Daniel. Now, if you think about those chapters, they're all narratives that describe a huge disappointment transferring into an appointment where God shows up, and there's a powerful point there. What we do is we take the CBT lens of cognitive distortions and how to dispute those into the storyline. So we apply it right into, for instance, when Nebuchadnezzar wakes up and he's had a bad dream, he can't remember, and he's all angry. We look at all these distorted thoughts he has, and he's going to kill all these guys. He's very reactive. So he's not getting sleep, and he's disturbed, and he's angry. You can see these patterns of thought. And God shows up. And Daniel prays, and we know the rest of the story. So we take people through those first 6 chapters, and if they're still interested, then we get into the last 6 chapters, chapters 7 through 12, which get into some of the more deeper prophecies, which is really healthy for frontal lobe thinking. Prophecy, abstract thinking, proverbs, symbols, those kind of things are really good for people that are depressed. So we find that the Bible is actually a great way to help people post-program to continue on with these disciplines.
So you mentioned the frontal lobe. Is that somehow is that somehow important to this idea? But maybe we have to go through the program to find that out. I'm not sure, but
No, this whole program really is about frontal lobe, re-engaging the frontal lobe. Almost every depressed person has what we call a frontal lobe is impaired. It's not functioning, and we can have PET scans to see that with the depressed person versus the same person when they're no longer depressed. They have much more blood flow, and the frontal lobe is responsible for those moral judgments and some of our thinking and reasoning capacities. So when that is suppressed through lack of exercise, high fat, high cholesterol diets, lack of water, lack of sunshine, lack of exercise, these things get the frontal lobe active again. Even in some of our other programs like CHIP and those kind of programs, we hear this like in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, they just feel lighter. And it hasn't been because they've lost weight. It's just the brain fog is gone, and they think clearer. So that is a key part. Almost every part of this program is about getting frontal lobe back engaged with the day-to-day life.
that's really interesting. I was actually thinking as well, because you were talking about how this program addresses the whole person. And you mentioned that the program can be done online on the portal, but there is this element when you do it on Zoom in the group. Is there something important about having that group setting and that group dynamic that helps people to deal with the anxiety and depression that they're feeling?
Look, I really think so, because a lot of times people that are depressed and or anxious, they're not looking at life through a very accurate lens. I've tried everything. Nothing will ever work for me. These all or nothing statements. And this facilitated discussion gives us an opportunity to kind of work through that. And then they're also watching other people go through the same journey. And so they get hope, they get encouragement. One of the big parts of this program is empowerment. Many people have been told or duped with the thought that they'll have to stay on medication the rest of their life. There's nothing they can do. It's a chemical imbalance in the brain. It's genetic. And it's like, no. In fact, Dr. Nedley, even though there's 10 hits, he found over 100 causes of depression, which means there's probably something in this program you've never tried before. And this is why this program can help from a multifactorial perspective as well. It's not just one thing we're looking at. We're looking at several different categories of causes. And this is the gem of the program. This is what helps people just break through that shadowy darkness and come back into a light.
And I think you're not only saying this from having witnessed this with the people you've worked with and going to the intense program, but as you mentioned at the beginning, you're passionate about this because you've experienced some of this as well. So you know from your own perspective that these things are true.
Absolutely. Had 2 boys that were reflux babies and never experienced that sleep deprivation thing. And it just got me into kind of a dark spot. And as I applied the program, and look, I'll be honest, if I don't apply it, I kind of start going down. If I apply it, it's there and it works. So it's one of those things where it is. It's a lifestyle. It's the way you live. It's the attitudes you cultivate, that attitude of gratefulness and positivity. Not an unrealistic optimism, but an optimism that's based in reality. And obviously there's a God component to this too. We while we're non-sectarian, we do provide a book on the Psalms and the Proverbs. So we do have a proverb a day. There's 31 proverbs, and so you can always pick that day of the month and you can read a proverb. And we go through what was a blessing to us in that. So even for people from a secular mindset, a lot of times they'll be in our program. They won't find it that offensive or anything, and it can help them as well. So these components are there to assist people and give them hope where in the past they may not have thought there was any hope.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying a lot of the things that you're saying, and I'm imagining for people, especially the fact that it's worked for people, that this could be, something that's looking like either for them to participate in the program or to think that this might be a good ministry for their church. Now, a church might be wondering, okay, we've decided to sign up. We've gotten the facilitator training. How do we find people to actually take part in this program?
Yes, so the way the program works is we have information sessions and usually run 2, 3, 4 of those prior to your actual starting date. Those information sessions have a special video that Dr. Nedley has put together to kind of, for lack of a better word, inform or advertise the program. It's at that information session then that you describe the books, the materials, what they're going to get in the program. That information session is absolutely free. And so even if people just came to that, they would get informed about the hit categories and pathways out of depression. The program, though, then is after that. It starts usually 2 to 3 weeks after the information sessions are done. The materials are ordered from the South Pacific Division here in Australia, so they only take a few days to get there. And then you can actually start with your session 1. And the DAT tests is all part of that. That's all online now. The DAT is online.
What's the
usually
DAT test?
That's the Depression and Anxiety Assessment Test.
Okay.
It's affectionately called DAT. And that's the test then that shows pre-program and post-program results.
Okay. So it's basically the church would advertise that information session. And
that's right.
That's you would imagine from the information session that people would decide if they wanted to sign up.
That's right. And that's the idea. So the information session I have found in rural areas, believe it or not, the good old local newspaper is one of the best ways to get that out. In more metro areas, word of mouth actually is the best way. But within an online environment, we find that Facebook is a good pathway as well, connecting with your friends. We either know somebody who's depressed or somebody who knows somebody who's depressed or anxious. It's so prevalent in our society. Right now with COVID restrictions, we probably have a lot of people experiencing what we call situational depression just because of the lockdown and stuff here in Victoria particularly. But it also tends to, restrictions like this can tend to uncover something that might have been subsurface and it's come to the surface. And so even though it's situational, you might find that there are a series of hits underneath that you need to address. So in the online environment, outside the online environment, one of the churches, as I mentioned, did a dinner with a doctor. That's a great way to invite community people who are interested in perhaps a variety of health programs, and you can highlight your depression and anxiety recovery at that dinner.
Yeah, it sounds like a great idea. The dinner with a doctor. It sounds,
Mm,
that's interesting. Kind of
yeah,
piqued my curiosity there.
yeah.
So, I guess I'm wondering, like, what would be your message? Like, if you wanted to say one thing to churches, what would be your message to them around this program?
Yeah, several things. Number one, pray about it. And if the Lord places this ministry on your heart, then take that first step of talking to 2 or 3 people in your church. Create that team, that nucleus group. Also include your pastor and your church board so that they're on board with this. But then get the training you need and then run the program. And it's in running that first program. That's kind of the hurdle we all go through. We have slip ups and the technology may not work or whatever, but just run that first program, have the joy of seeing some lives transformed and changed. And after that, well, the rest is just a piece of cake. Once you get through that first program, I say that kind of kiddingly, but it's getting through that first program. So do the training and then connect with your church leadership and run it in your community, even if you ran it for your local church. This would be a real blessing to those in your faith community.
And I just want to ask this one other question because you've mentioned that this is like the program does take something from you because you're dealing with people who need to take something from you. How many times would you say it's reasonable for a church to run this a year? Because it's quite an intense program.
Yeah, look, I would say once a year. We have had churches do it twice. I think you would want to rotate some of those facilitators, perhaps through it, so that they weren't getting burned out or anything like that. One thing we definitely wouldn't want is for the staff to become depressed or anxious
Yes.
through the program. So self-care is really important in that regard, but having the group to go through it together. So typically facilitators might get together afterwards and just share what some of their dynamics in their group. And look, we're a confidential community, but we're open within that group. Obviously, we don't share what happens in the group outside that group. But the self-care is important, and I'm particularly watchful as I see the facilitators in the program. So I say this too, there are other programs that can also be effective in your community, and a real effective health ministries team in a local church might schedule out 1 to 2 years, and they might have a variety of programs in that span of 24 months, in which depression recovery is one of the tools they use to reach out to their community.
I like that you're saying that use all the tools that you have. This is quite an intense program, but there are other ways you can reach out to accomplish a similar thing.
Yeah, there are other programs like Food Sense is a program I started down here in Victoria. It's a very light program, just 3 sessions, and actually it's something I can do on a Sunday morning and a Sunday afternoon at a church. That's a very engaging program. When I say light, it's active, interactive. The people cook. We go to a supermarket and we do a tour. The CHIP program, that's a more intense program. It's like a 16 session program. Elia Wellness is an online platform. So there are resources there that can either be done online or in person, and there's training for that. There are a variety of programs now that are available. And again, we're looking at dealing with the whole person. So physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. When we just have programs that deal with one and not the other, that might be a good introductory or entering wedge program, but eventually we want a whole person program that deals with people on multiple levels, because that's where we get sustained change. And that's the objective in these programs.
Well, Andrew, I want to thank you for joining me today because this has been quite informative for me as well. One thing I would like to say as we're closing up here, someone might have seen the title of what we're talking about today and seen anxiety and depression and actually felt like, oh, that's what I'm actually experiencing right now.
Mm.
And we've actually chatted about how a church can facilitate a program, but I'm wondering if you can give any message or tips or just guidance for someone who did see the title and they were looking for that bit of hope of how to push through their anxiety and depression, maybe
Sure.
even something from the program you can just give them.
Yeah, so number one is, again, there are many causes to depression and anxiety, and it's important to look at what you can do not what you can't do or what you can't overcome. Your genetics, they aren't changeable. Your past, you can't change your past. So that developmental hit, you can't do that. But the other 8 areas are areas you can slowly make changes and take those baby steps. Practically speaking, if I were talking with somebody who is depressed, I would tell them to do 3 things. Take a drink of water, go around the block and go for a walk. And then thirdly is look for one of these types of programs to help them. Exercise, fresh air, hydrating the system are a good way to start getting the frontal lobe more active. The more activating your frontal lobe is, the easier decisions will be to make in the future. And that's what we're unlocking as they go through the program.
Well, thank you for those guidelines and those tips. I wouldn't have known that water was so important that it could actually combat depression, but we
Yeah.
learn something new every day. Would you mind just saying a little prayer for churches who may be considering doing this program, and even for people who might be experiencing anxiety and depression right now?
Happy to, Rachel. Thank you. Let's bow our
Thanks.
heads. Father in heaven, we do want to just thank you for your goodness toward us, your love, your care. And I take comfort in the fact that Jesus revealed his ministry as one who came to set the captives free and to heal the brokenhearted. Thank you for healing our hearts, our minds, our whole being. And Lord, I want to pray for those who are considering this as a ministry within their local church, that you would touch their minds and indicate to them whether this is something they could be involved in, they could be trained to do, they can get a team around and really see lives transformed in their community. And Lord, I also want to pray for those who might be experiencing depression and or anxiety in their life right now. We've been through a difficult year as a country, as a world, and we're just grateful that we can look to you, but we can also find practical ways to bring that resilience back to our brains and to be re-engaged with life. And so, Lord, I just pray for each person here that might be struggling in these arenas to reach out to somebody they can trust and get to a program that will deal with these multifactorial issues in their life. So bless us, Lord, as we seek to help and love our fellow neighbor and you with our heart, soul, mind, and strength is my prayer in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much. And if you're considering this program, remember, get in touch with your conference's health director. You can also message us and we'll try to direct you to the proper place to go to as well. God bless you in your ministry and in your mental health. See you next time.
God bless.